Welcome, fight fans, to Boxing Scene's Top Stories, only on ProBox TV, your boxing channel. I am George D. Metellus, and we'd like to remind you ProBox TV continues with the long-form content like the Ranking Show and Big Fight Breakdown, and Top Stories has a playlist as well on our YouTube channel, and now you can get it in audio form where podcasts are available. ProBox TV, your boxing channel, trying to conquer all of media. And it is always more fun when you have the champions involved. We have Chris Algieri and Paulie Malignaggi joining us here on Top Stories. Well, with Terence Crawford moving up to 154, 147, by some accounts, may be considered kind of a wasteland. You have Boots Ennis, you have Brian Norman, who just was upgraded to WBO champion. So, Chris, who is going to fill in the void and become the top star at 147?
I don't know if I would necessarily call it a wasteland. There are some talented fighters there. You mentioned Jaron Ennis. You've got Stanionis, who's a fantastic fighter. I would really like to see Ennis and Stanionis tangle. Mario Barrios is a good fighter who's looking to be improving all the time. He looked really good in his last fight against Ugas, and he also fought Fabio Maidana. So I think he's an ever-improving fighter, and I think he's a dangerous guy at 147. You know, there's a lot of good fights that are out there. Brian Norman Jr. just got elevated for the WBO. He's the champion there. Stanionis, I believe, was elevated as well. So we have a bunch of young fighters. And in terms of, marketability and star power, there's not a ton besides Jaron. But in terms of talent, I think there's a lot of good fights that can be made. And it'll be interesting to see how this all pans out if we can get all of these guys into the ring together.
Yeah, I agree, Cham. I wouldn't necessarily call it a wasteland. I'd call it more open pastures. There's some good fighters there. There's not anybody that really sticks out in your head except for Ennis. And Ennis is more so sticking out in your head for all the potential he has based on how he's looked and the way we want to see him against upper-level competition. But there's certainly a lot of potential in a weight class like this because you do have some good, talented fighters. You mentioned a few of them. I don't think anybody really stands out as like, wow, that's a star in the making. And I think that's why I would rather call it open pastures. The 147-pound landscape, Ennis seems to be the favorite to be able to grab the bull by the horns and become the star, be the favorite, the darling of the group. But nonetheless, there's still some pretty good fighters in there that, although they don't have that superstar potential in your eyes, if you match them up against each other, they're pretty good fighters. They're championship level fighters, and so you can basically, like, for example, you make a Barrios and Norman fight. Okay, it's not two superstars, but it's an interesting fight. You really can't really pick a winner for sure because neither guy has impressed to the max. But at the same time, there's been moments of brilliance from both guys, and then you got Ennis, who's obviously had a lot of moments of brilliance, but he can't seem to get the big name in the ring. Stanionis has had some hard luck as well with some fights falling through. He looks like to be a rough and rugged character. So if the fights can come together here, and then we've also talked about that, Champ, you mentioned in another news piece that Haney may be looking at 147. That's always something to keep an eye on as well, as Haney was big in 135 or 140. You got some potential there. There's open pastures. Things can kind of move around and open up, but you can look at it as a wasteland from the point of view that there's no, all of a sudden it went from the megastars that we were spoiled with. You had not only did you have Crawford, but you had, guys like Spence, Danny Garcia, Sean Porter. You had all these guys at 147 all at the same time for a while, and so many other names that, now to look at the 147-pound division from what it looks like right now, you're apt to say, oh, it's a wasteland. But let's be optimistic. Let's call it open pastures. There's some potential here to develop some things, and the fighters are there, and we'll see how it builds up.
So, Chris, is it a situation where it's like a team reloading here with a lot of very good players, maybe not that one superstar, but a lot of very good, excellent fighters?
I would call it a transition. It's a transition phase now. We've got, those superstars moving up, retiring, leaving the sport, and you got the young guys who are coming up. And that's one thing that's good about when you have a unified champion moving on to another weight class. It releases a bunch of belts and allows these younger fighters to come up and get some notoriety. But what we need is a tournament. We need everybody to fight each other, and we need another unified champion. And maybe that's where something like the Turkey Al Sheikh, the Riyadh season come in, make these fights, make these promoters work together, and create one king at 147.
Yeah, Paulie, what do you make of that, like the depth? Instead of a superstar, you have very good fighters making up a good team.
Yeah, I think that Champ Chris made a good point. You have a guy who goes undisputed and then he leaves and the belts become open, and sort of becomes, again, that use that term open pastures. Guys try to grab belts, try to compete for the weight class, try to compete for dominance over at the top of it. And sometimes it develops nicely, and sometimes it doesn't develop so nicely. If you look at for example, recently the 130, 135-pound division, Devin Haney vacated all the titles and moved up in weight. And you know what? The 135-pound division has really rebounded nicely. Some really solid world champions there. And it's a weight class that is all of a sudden a ton of talent when you just were thinking, oh, it's going to be left barren when all these talented guys go to 135. Well, not so much, not so fast. The 135-pound division, really, it moved into star power really, really quickly. And there's some solid names and champions at that weight class that all of a sudden you're salivating for those matchups to happen. So 147 pounds could move in that direction as well. I'm not saying for sure, but there's some talented guys there, and we'll see what they can kind of build up together if they do fight each other.
Yeah, it seems that 147 welterweight has the potential to be maybe a very deep division with a lot of entertaining fights. All right, gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. We always appreciate you here on Top Stories. And don't forget to scan the QR code. And the best live fight series on the planet continues Wednesday, August 21st with Wednesday Night Fights. I'm George DeMatteis. Thank you for watching Boxing Scene's Top Stories.
Wednesday Night Fights.
Dynamite action on Wednesday Night Fights every other Wednesday on your boxing channel.
Coming up on your next Wednesday Night Fights, August 21st. Former Unified World Champion Swift Jarrett Hurd takes on former Unified World Champion Jason Banana Rosario. Live from the ProBox Event Center in Plant City. Get your tickets at proboxtv.com or take your chances at the door. Wednesday Night Fights.
For more ProBox TV, scan the QR code on the screen or go to the App Store and Google Play. ProBox TV, your boxing channel.